Welcome back to the Compliance Officer's Playbook podcast.
It's great to be here.
You think you have compliance headaches? Imagine having to explain to your board how you just got slapped with a $37 million fine.
Oof, that's rough.
That's what happened to Brink's Global Services USA, Inc., when the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network came knocking earlier this month.
And what's really interesting about this case is that it's actually the first time the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network has taken action against an armored car company.
Yeah, this is huge news, right? Like the first of its kind. They announced this civil money penalty on February 6th, and I feel like everyone's been buzzing about it ever since.
For good reason.
Definitely.
It really highlights, I think, the expanding reach of the Bank Secrecy Act and its implications for, a wider range of businesses than maybe we traditionally think of.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit for our listeners who maybe aren't totally up to speed on the case. Brink's, as we know, is obviously a major player in secure transportation and cash management.
Huge play.
Global operations.
Hundreds of millions of dollars in bulk currency shipments.
Domestically and across borders.
Absolutely.
But here's the kicker. They were doing all of this without the necessary anti-money laundering controls in place.
Right.
It's not like they were, some small startup flying under the radar. Brink's is the name in armored transport.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so significant. The Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network found that Brink's committed willful violations of the Bank Secrecy Act.
Wolf.
They failed to register as a money services business. They didn't have an adequate AML program, and they neglected to file suspicious activity reports even when dealing with high-risk entities.
So hold on, wouldn't Brink's size itself be a red flag? I mean, just the sheer volume of cash that they're moving. Don't regulators, have them on a watch list by default?
You would think.
Right.
But this is where it gets interesting. One of the entities Brink's was dealing with was a Mexican currency exchanger that later pleaded guilty to violating the Bank Secrecy Act.
Okay, so now we're potentially talking about money laundering activities linked to narcotics trafficking and other illicit enterprises. Are you telling me that Brink's was totally oblivious to this?
That's the million-dollar question. Was it deliberate flouting of the rules, or was it a blind spot in their risk assessment?
Because that's what should make compliance officers nervous.
That should make you nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. By failing to implement, proper controls, Brink's essentially exposed the U.S. financial system to significant risks. This case, I think, really highlights how crucial it is for all businesses, regardless of their industry, to take compliance seriously.
The Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is sending a message with this one.
What's the message?
Ignorance is not a defense.
All right, so let's delve a little deeper into the specific missteps that landed Brink's in hot water here.
Okay.
First and foremost, they failed to register as a money services business with the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, even though they were clearly engaging in activities that fall under this definition.
Right, and this isn't some, obscure technicality.
Right.
We're talking about the very foundation of AML compliance.
Like step one.
Yeah, know your obligations under the Bank Secrecy Act.
Right.
The regulations are complex and evolving, so it's crucial for compliance professionals to stay informed and ensure that their companies are operating within the law.
Absolutely. They also failed to develop, implement, and maintain an effective AML program. And this isn't just about having a policy document on a shelf somewhere, right? It's about creating a comprehensive framework that includes risk assessments, customer due diligence procedures, transaction monitoring, employee training, the whole 9 yards.
And it's not a one-time thing either.
Right.
An effective AML program requires ongoing review and updates to keep pace with emerging threats and regulatory changes.
Oh, for sure. And then, of course, there's the failure to file suspicious activity reports. I mean, come on, we're talking about dealings with a Mexican exchanger later convicted of BSA violations. Red flags were waving. Were they just ignoring them?
Failing to file SARs when you have red flags like that is a major lapse in compliance.
Huge lapse.
It can hinder investigations and allow illicit activities to continue unchecked.
Yeah.
It's really a critical component of an AML program.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the fallout. The $37 million civil money penalty is obviously a hefty price to pay. But Brink's will also be subject to an AML program review. What does that mean?
Well, that means they're going to have to undergo a thorough examination of their compliance procedures and make significant changes to address the deficiencies that the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network identified.
Right. So this is standard practice in these types of enforcement actions.
Absolutely. The Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network wants to make sure that the company is taking concrete steps to remediate the issues and prevent future violations.
So the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network Director, Andrea Gamacki, had some pretty strong words about this case.
She did.
What did she have to say?
She basically emphasized the importance of safeguarding the U.S. financial system and made it clear that the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network will take action against those who fail to uphold their responsibilities.
Yeah, I read her statement, and let's just say she wasn't in a forgiving mood. If I were a compliance officer right now, I'd be double-checking my coffee wasn't spiked with anxiety.
Right. It's a powerful statement, and
Yeah.
it underscores the seriousness with which the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is approaching AML compliance.
For sure.
This isn't just about punishing violators. It's about sending a message to the entire industry that these rules matter.
So what does all of this mean for compliance professionals like you and me and everyone listening?
Well, I think this case serves as a stark reminder that AML compliance is not just for banks and financial institutions.
Right.
Any company that handles significant amounts of cash or engages in transactions that could be vulnerable to money laundering needs to have a robust AML program in place.
And I don't think anyone listening to this thinks they're off the hook just because they're not a bank.
No, absolutely not.
This applies to all of us.
This means staying up to date on regulatory requirements, conducting thorough risk assessments, implementing effective monitoring and reporting mechanisms, and really fostering a culture of compliance throughout your entire organization.
So compliance needs to be like embedded in the DNA of the company.
From the top down.
Go top down, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think this case also highlights the importance of proactive communication and collaboration with regulators.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, don't wait for an investigation to, engage with the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network or other relevant agencies.
Right. If you have questions or concerns, reach out to them for guidance.
Right.
A strong relationship with your regulators can be invaluable.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to navigate the complex world of AML compliance.
And you know what else we haven't really talked about but is really important in all this? What's that?
Technology.
Oh, yeah, technology, automated transaction monitoring systems, data analytics, and other, innovative tools can really be instrumental in enhancing your AML compliance efforts.
Technology can help companies identify suspicious activity much more efficiently and effectively, freeing up compliance professionals to focus on more strategic tasks.
So it's all about striking that balance
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
technology and human expertise.
Precisely. The machines can do some of the heavy lifting, but you still need skilled compliance professionals to interpret the data, investigate alerts, and make those informed decisions about filing SARs.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the bigger picture here. What message do you think the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is sending with this enforcement action?
Well, I think it's a clear signal that they're really expanding their focus beyond traditional financial institutions.
Right.
They're looking at any business that poses a potential risk to the financial system, and they're not afraid to take aggressive action against violators.
It's not just about banks anymore.
Exactly. If you're moving money, we're watching you.
Yeah, they're not just watching.
And we're not afraid to come down hard if we see something amiss.
It's a wake-up call for the entire business community.
Every industry is on notice.
No industry is immune.
Even those who might consider themselves low risk, they need to sit up and take notice.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the ripple effects? I mean, I have to imagine that this case is going to have some pretty significant ripple effects across a number of industries.
I think we can expect to see increased scrutiny of the entire armored car industry, for sure.
Oh, yeah?
Regulators will be looking very closely at other companies in this sector to make sure that they're complying with the Bank Secrecy Act.
If I were working at one of Brink's competitors right now, I'd be sweating bullets.
Me too.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see similar enforcement actions against other types of businesses that handle large amounts of cash, like
casinos, money transmitters, even some retailers.
So this case sets a precedent.
It does.
That could have far-reaching implications.
Exactly. So the question is, where do we go from here?
Right. It's like, how do we make sure that we don't end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal like Brink's?
I think it's time for a paradigm shift in how we approach AML compliance.
Okay.
We need to move beyond just a reactive, compliance-driven mindset and embrace a more proactive, risk-based approach.
So what does that look like in practice?
It means integrating compliance into the very core of your business operations.
Okay.
It means viewing compliance as a strategic advantage, not just a regulatory burden.
I like that, turning compliance from a cost center into a value driver.
Exactly.
That's a tough sell, though, in a lot of
It
organizations.
can be, but the Brinks case shows us what happens when you treat compliance as an afterthought.
Yeah, $37 million afterthought.
Right, you end up with a $37 million problem and a whole lot of explaining to do.
And it means fostering a culture of compliance throughout the organization.
You got it.
Yeah.
Everyone from the CEO down to the frontline employees needs to be on board.
So compliance can't just be the compliance department's job.
No, it needs to be everyone's responsibility.
It's a tall order.
It is, but it's essential if we want to be effective in combating financial crime.
I agree.
This Brinks case has given us a lot to think about.
It really has. I mean, it's like a master class in what not to do.
It's a stark reminder that AML compliance is not something we can afford to ignore.
Right.
The stakes are too high.
I think we've successfully navigated this deep dive into the Brinks case, and you know what it all means for the compliance world.
Yeah, we've definitely uncovered some pretty interesting insights, I think, along the way.
You know what really stands out to me? It's not just the size of the penalty, but the fact that this happened to Brinks. I mean, if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, right?
Absolutely no one is immune.
No one.
This case is a wake-up call for all of us. We can't afford to be complacent. The risk landscape is constantly evolving. We need to be proactive in adapting our compliance programs.
Yeah, let's recap some key takeaways here for our listeners.
Yeah.
What are some of the big things that we should be taking away from this case?
I think first and foremost, the Brinks case is a stark reminder that the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is serious about enforcing the Bank Secrecy Act across all industries.
Not just banks.
Not just traditional financial institutions.
Right.
They're looking at everyone who handles cash.
And they mean business.
They do $37 million, says it all.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear message.
This means that every organization that handles significant amounts of cash or engages in transactions that could be vulnerable to money laundering needs to have a robust and up-to-date AML program in place.
It's not enough to just have a program in place.
Right.
It needs to be effective.
Right.
It needs to be tailored to your specific risks, and it needs to be constantly evolving.
You got it. It's about actively implementing it, ensuring its effectiveness, and continuously adapting it as the risk landscape changes.
We also talked about the importance of a risk-based approach to compliance,
Yeah.
going beyond that check-the-box mentality.
Right.
What else was really important here?
I think conducting thorough risk assessments, understanding your customer base, implementing robust due diligence procedures, and leveraging technology for efficient transaction monitoring, suspicious activity detection, all of that is critical.
And you know, we can't forget about employee training.
Right.
That's huge.
Right. Absolutely. Building a culture of compliance within an organization.
Your employees are your first line of defense.
They are a well-informed and vigilant workforce is your best defense against financial crime.
They need to be your partners in this.
Exactly.
And this case also, I think, underscore the importance of proactive communication collaboration with regulators.
Oh, for sure.
Like engage with the Department of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and other relevant agencies.
Reach out to them for guidance if you need it.
Right.
Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and talk to your regulators.
You can be a valuable resource.
Absolutely, they can.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key message that you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the Brinks case serves as a wake-up call for all of us in the compliance field.
Wake-up call.
It highlights the evolving nature of financial crime and the need for a proactive and comprehensive approach to AML compliance.
It's a reminder that we can't just sit back and wait for something to happen.
No, we need to be proactive in identifying and mitigating risks.
A failure to adapt and stay ahead of the curve can have significant consequences.
We saw that firsthand with Brinks.
And who knows who's next?
It's a reminder that the work that we do as compliance professionals is crucial in safeguarding the financial system and protecting our organizations from the risks associated with money laundering.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AML compliance. We hope you found this episode informative and insightful.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And if you did, be sure to subscribe to the Compliance Officer's Playbook podcast for more deep dives into the ever-evolving world of compliance. We'll be back next week with another case that's sure to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Until next time, stay compliant and stay informed.